In this exercise, we're going to draw a winter tree to help us develop our skills in recognizing shading and contrast and texture. Um, let's begin. We'll start with creating our skyline. And in this case, we're going to have more sky than not. And we'll keep this um, rather simple. I'd like to use a line drawing tool. We'll create a blue line, sky blue across the bottom, across the base. At a diagonal, we'll take it up. And this light sky is going to be kind of bright, so I'm going to keep the line a little high. And the bottom side, I want it to be down, just 1/3 off the bottom. That'll allow for our rule of thirds to be prominent in our picture. We'll fill in and create our gradient. There we are. We'll change that back to 800, and we should have a nice gradient sky. I'll put a background so we have at least some skyline by putting some snow in. And to do that, I'll use the select tool, the freeform select tool, to cut out the mountains. I'll start from the bottom, go up the edge, and just when I see that I'm into the sky, I'll just make it some gentle sloping lines. I don't want to have this to be too sophisticated. And now I can see somewhat of a skyline. We want mostly sky because in this exercise, our tree, I want to be able to put snow on the branches, and I don't want it to have to compete or contrast with snow in the background. To draw our tree, we'll use a regular paintbrush. We'll make it the largest size, and our base color for the tree is going to be dark gray. This paintbrush size, I believe, is just a little bit small, so by holding Control and pressing the plus key, I can enlarge it to about that size. We want our tree trunk, our tree, to be smooth, and we'll draw it somewhat like this. Maybe a third point here. We'll bring it back down the center, like a center root. When I teach my elementary, I tell them that we want to draw a chicken foot. So roughly something like this. I can change the size to be the largest default size, and with that, create a little bit more for my tree trunk. When a tree grows, we have learned that by observation that a tree grows about the same amount every season. And that same amount every season, from when it's a first seedling all the way up through maturity, we can recognize that same amount in the branches that come out of the tree. And as the forces of nature, lack of sunshine happen, those branches disappear, but that amount of tree growth tends to be consistent in that length. And by knowing this, we're going to make our tree have branches, and every time a branch comes out, we'll split it, and we'll make that branch grow up about the same amount, representing that characteristic we know about trees, where they grow every year. So we'll go to a smaller size yet. So I'm splitting each one of these branches twice. There, I've filled in my branches, and now I'm ready to do some shading or contouring. And we're going to do this first work on the trunk of our tree. There we are. And I'll use the paintbrush, the watercolor paintbrush, because it distributes my paint better, I believe. And we'll go right to black. And I'll change the size to be, well, not quite that big. I suppose that will be a good size. Now, as I've demonstrated before in earlier videos, the watercolor paintbrush tends to, as you go from left to right, or bottom to top in this case, it paints on one side when you go one direction, and from the other side when you go the other direction. So if we keep that in mind, we can get our paint to line and go where we want it to go. Press Ctrl Z to get rid of those, and we'll start by putting a black shade on our tree. I think I'll just do part of the root. I'll start from the top on the underside of this tree. Now I am going to put a highlight on the outside edge later. We'll talk about that. The fact that the snow reflects some of the light. And here's where I'll go from the bottom up and try to get my root edge. So generally we cover this side. Again, start from the top. Now if our paintbrush is too big, and right now it appears to be too big, I'm going to change the size to be a size smaller. We'll try that. That seems to work. So I suppose, creating what's called an anti-highlight. In other words, I'm just putting a little shadow line on the back sides of these branches. My rule of thumb is the light comes from this upper quadrant in this area, so every side that's opposite of that gets a treatment that is darker. Now at this joint I have a choice of how I want to define where this branch goes. If I bring this across the front, it defines the fact that this branch comes from the back side. And as many branches as you can stand, we'll put a highlight on. Now this branch is tilted in this direction, which means to me it's kind of neutral. It's not this side facing, but it's also facing up. So I'll leave it that way. However, this branch is not. So for this treatment, I'll stop and start, which creates a finer shadow. There. If I dare try, there we go. So some of the major shadows have been put in. Let's tidy this up a little bit. And now I'm going to go to the other side. So I'm going to use a lighter gray, or the palette default light gray. And on this side I'll start from the bottom up, because that'll allow my paint to flow right. Don't worry about the tree's general shape or width. We can fix those things. In other words, I've noticed that the trunk is just a little narrow through here at the stump. I did use a larger paintbrush before. I can kind of sense that. So I'll go back to that larger paintbrush and apply that paint here on this side. And now back to the smaller one, where I can apply that highlight to several of these branches. Now in highlighting the top, we're starting to get into where we are defining the where the snow could be. So we have to be careful we don't invest too much there. Okay, And as we did before with the other side, if I were to extend this in here, it defines the fact that this part of the tree is more dominant. This branch is on this side of the tree. So I'm going to switch over to pencil. And using these same colors with pencil, the smallest size, I'll start with black, I can create more of a contrast. And in this, I find randomness is better. What we're creating is a texture for our tree, a bark texture. And we're implying that there are ridges and edges that can be seen with black, and there'll be more so on the dark side, of course. So they'll be concentrated on this outside edge, and we will also have some into the gray. In fact, we might even have just a few on the white side. And since this is depicting or giving emphasis on the roughness of the bark, it'll only happen for the more mature branches. So we don't have to worry about adding this to the finer detail of our branches. So now those few that are out here, I think that's enough for now. We can always add some later. And I'll do the same with the lighter color gray. So now I've added some texture to my tree. And next, I think I'll add some snow to some of the branches. And in this we have to be a little careful. And to do this, I'll use the watercolor again. And as I use this watercolor paintbrush, I'll lay in some snow. And remember, when we do this, we're not coloring over the branch. Sure, we'll go into the branch, but we're actually adding thickness to the branch where thickness normally wouldn't have been. So that thickness needs to be perceived and recognized as snow coming in. Down here I'll add some, and we will cover some of what we've drawn, which is okay. And our snow, I'm going to cradle it here a little bit like it's picked up, and I'll even put some on the light side. And our snow will cover up some of our texture and contour that we've created by using our shading, and that's to be expected. But we do have some of the pattern coming out from under the snow, which gives it some credibility. Especially our horizontal branches. Anytime we have a horizontal branch, we want to acknowledge that snow does and did build up there. Okay. I did notice I have a branch in the background that's straight up and down, and that does happen in nature, but so seldom that we're just not used to seeing that. So this looks like a telephone pole or anything but a branch. So I have to find a way to fix that. Okay. Zoom back out 200%, and there we have a winter tree.